Okay, welcome back, Counterpoint students. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're keeping up with the work. If you're running a little bit behind, you can always catch up, but make sure you're staying on top of it. Okay, so today we are finishing up our overview of third species counterpoint. Remember last time that we were looking at the connection between species 1 to species 2 and to species 3, and how they are interrelated. In fact, if you are having trouble coming up with some responses for species 1, well, actually, species 3, excuse me, it's possible to start with species 1 as a framework. As we can see here, going from an octave to a third. You could fill those in by starting from a higher place. You turn it into species 2 or to species 3. Okay, that way you have an idea of where you're headed. Where's the next place that you're headed? Okay, and from the work I saw, looks like you understand the relationship between those species. The other thing that we covered was that while we're looking at similar problems, that we're avoiding parallelisms and similar motion, right? But sometimes this looks different because, well, of course, this is more obvious when you have two back-to-back perfect intervals. Okay, there we can easily see, right? That's easy to spot. Those are two parallel fifths. Here, this is a little harder to see. This is an upbeat to a downbeat. This is in the middle of the measure. This is still on a slightly stronger beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. We tend to think of 1 as being the heaviest and 3 as being slightly less strong in a measure of 4, 4 or 2, 2. So the argument is that you would still hear that as parallel octaves, because halfway through the bar we have that octave. So here we would still treat that as parallel octaves. Okay, that's slightly harder to catch. And even more removed is from downbeat to downbeat. So again, you will not have this problem if you're using species 1 as a framework, because you will have worked out, where am I headed next? Where's my next goal? And you will have worked out a place to go that is not problematic. So if you start with that framework, this downbeat to downbeat problem should not be the case. Okay, some things to consider before you start composing. Okay, this is a good summary. You can keep this in mind. You can keep referring back to this if you're having trouble coming up with some responses for coming up with your counterpoint against the cantus firmus. It is better to think in groups of 5 rather than 4. And why is that? Well, you're thinking about where you're headed from downbeat to the next downbeat, especially in the case of the Nota Cambiata or the double neighbor. You're thinking of a 5-note group, not just a 4-note group. So when you're memorizing that pattern, make sure you're thinking of all 5 notes. Okay, consonant skips. By all means, you may use them. In fact, they're a nice way of establishing some variety. If you look back at some of the examples, for example, here. There we have a humongous leap of an octave, and of course, once we leap up, we have to recover by step in the opposite motion. This is a great way of establishing, well, we're exploring a new part of the voice here, so the upper range. Even before that, we have these nice consonant skips. Notice that they're just skipping by a third, and you're going to a consonant, hence the phrase consonant skip. If you leap, of course, you want to be leaping by, you can leap by a 4th, you can leap by a 5th, a 6th, or an octave. You do want to watch out for dissonant intervals. So you would not want to leap by an augmented 4th or diminished 5th. So you want to be wary of the dreaded tritone in every key has at least 1. If you're in the minor mode, well, it has even more. At a cadence, you'd want to avoid, let's say, G to C sharp. That would be a problem. Okay, and of course you want to avoid sevenths as well. So that's, again, accenting and a dissonance, even when you're playing or singing them melodically. Okay, so consonant skips and leaps are good. Notice also that you tend to have them within the measure. So you won't have a big octave leap to the downbeat. You're going, because that would have the sense of accenting. Often you're going to find it in the middle of a measure here. Okay. Other things that you want to pay attention to, just like we've seen, mostly you're going to have passing motion. This is what we've seen from the beginning, that this art form is really about stepwise motion, conjunct versus disjunct. It's mostly conjunct motion. This is great. We're free to use neighbor tones, upper neighbor, lower neighbor. This is always good to use. We do want to be careful about having too much circular motion. So you don't want a melody that sounds like this. Right? It's very tiring very quickly. We didn't really go anywhere. But if it was, right there I was attempting to work in leaps, and that really frees up some space. So if you find yourself sticking within 3, 4, 5 note group, well, consider using some leaps to break yourself out of that. This is a big one. Every dissonant interval should be passing or neighboring, unless, can you think of the two exceptions that we already talked about? The Nota Cambiata, they call it just Cambiata, but Nota Cambiata is the same thing, exchanged note, or the double neighbor. What does that mean? That in the case of the Cambiata and the double neighbor, you are allowed to have 2 back-to-back dissonances. It won't always happen, but it often does. So the Cambiata, double neighbor, those are the 2 exceptions to this rule. So watch out for that dissonance and how it's used, per usual. Let's look at some examples so that we can be wary of that. Okay, let me find my red. Okay, here we go. Here we have a dissonance. Okay, that's passing motion. Good. Here we have another dissonance. Again, passing motion. Passing motion. Okay, I'm sensing a pattern here. Passing motion. Passing. My goodness, I'm repeating myself quite a lot. Finally. Okay, we have a neighbor. Passing motion. Passing motion. Passing motion. So as we can see, we mostly have passing motion. There wasn't one instance of neighboring motion. Here we did not have a Nota Cambiata or a double neighbor, and that's okay. But it is good to know that we have that as a possibility. Let's look at another one. Our first example here. Here we had passing motion, passing motion, passing motion. Here's the Nota Cambiata. Now notice that in this case, this is a dissonance going to a consonance. This is all right. It doesn't have to be 2 back-to-back dissonances. It's just saying that if this was 4 going to 2, for instance, well, that would be all right. Okay. All right, here we had neighboring motion. Over here we have neighbor, passing motion. Okay, all good. Yes, here's that rule that we just discovered. So this is a note. Double neighbor. Notice the lower neighbor, upper neighbor. We already analyzed this on our last class period. And look at this. We have 2 back-to-back dissonances. This is, again, all right in this one case. I should say 1 out of 2 cases, because we're allowed to have 2 back-to-back dissonances using either the double neighbor or the Nota Cambiata. All right, and then finishing up with passing motion. So as you can see, still passing motion wins. You might have some neighboring motion. You might have one Nota Cambiata or one double neighbor, but you don't want too many of them. Okay, and let's go to down the list here. We're almost done with our general considerations in species 3 counterpoint. Watch out for forbidden parallels, as we just reviewed. Okay, those could be adjacent parallels, those could be upbeat to downbeat parallels, or those could be downbeat to downbeat parallels. Of course, write the interval numbers between the lines. This is always good to do. And check the contour. Now, this is, on a test or quiz, I would be less picky about this, but it's good to remember that in general, that the whole art form is making a smooth, beautiful, flowing line, making a nice contour, but usually ascending and then coming back down. I say usually because if you have a counterpoint below that, sometimes you have a lower peak, or let's call it a valley. All right, let's look at the overall shape here. Here we have a little hill, another little hill. Here we have the mountain peak. There's the highest peak. And then we come back down, we work our way down the mountain. And then we finish on a little hill here. So the overall shape was like this, right? Even though we had peaks and valleys, well, we still have one high point. Okay, there you have it. Okay, so, and the last thing to do, and really this is something you should always be doing as you're checking your homework, just listening to your exercise. That it's not just math homework. It's like math homework that you get to listen to. So isn't that a joy? And in this way, you might catch something that feels awkward. If you're having trouble singing it, there might be too many leaps. Maybe you leapt and went the wrong direction. Maybe there's a dissonant interval that you're leaping towards. Maybe there's a parallelism. You might catch it just by going through the process of singing it or playing it at the piano, or both. Okay, so let's look at your homework assignment. Here I've given you, this is called Species 3 Review. This is the first time that you're trying to write a Species 3 counterpoint. It says, compose a successful counterpoint to the given cantus firmus. Make sure you know the rules before attempting. Put intervallic figures, triangles for dissonances, circles for perfect consonances, and label the dissonances as either passing, neighbor, double neighbor, or Nota Cambiata. You might have more than one per measure. As in, you might have a passing and then another neighboring motion, for example. Work on a scratch piece of paper and copy the final draft. That's an important bit of information, just so I can see the notes. You want it nice and clean. Okay, so think about, all right, how do we typically start? Okay, well, usually we start with a quarter rest. You don't have to. You could start on the downbeat, but this is typical. How do you typically end? Well, we're going to be ending with an octave. So probably not down here. I think we'll end on the octave here. Let me make this a little skinnier, just so we have room. Okay, so here's our A. And what do I know? Well, probably we're going to use the double neighbor figure here. In fact, if you just copy this, that's fine with me, because this is typically how you end third species. So we're going to go double neighbor, which means we're going to start with the leading tone. And notice we're headed upwards. So it's going to be the upwards ascending, the ascending double neighbor. So that would go da, 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 ti, do, la, ti, do. And yes, I did say la, because otherwise we'd have an awkward interval. Ti, do, le, ti, do. It's awkward to sing. So we want to raise this leading tone and raise this sixth scale degree as well. Ti, do, la, ti, do. And there you have it. And what is this? Double neighbor. Excuse me. It's always good to check your intervals just in case. 6, 7, perfect fifth, 6th. Okay, and I'm going to put triangle for dissonance, going to an octave. So there we have it. There's the most typical ending, species 3. What about the beginning? Okay, well, let's see where we're headed. Let's try to come up with an overall goal. So let's say I'll probably start on the same note that I'm ending on. If I can't work that out, then that's okay. Let's say I want to head for how about a third up? That's a good place. So I'm going to use my species 1 as a framework. Okay, so I want to head for this note here. So okay, I'm going to use quarter notes. Let me color this in here. Okay. Okay, and what could I do? Well, let's see if I just try to walk up. Does that work? Oh, look, I have enough beats here. I think this actually works well. So I'm going to finish those quarter notes. Okay, that works. Yeah. Then again, I'm filling in the intervals. Here, is it okay to have parallel thirds? Totally fine. Oops, I don't want to block that out. And there you have it. Okay, there's our first measure. Now, where are we headed from here? What could we do? Let's say again, I would use species 1 as a framework, so that you have a good sense of where you're headed. Here, I think I'll use a little voice exchange. This is going to the octave. Now, what if I did octave to octave? Oh, you know that won't work. That's not going to be good. Well, how about in opposite motion, in contrary motion? No, that works pretty well. Now notice I'm kind of hovering around the same place a lot of the time, so I think I want to break out of this. I think it would be nice to get away. Maybe I try to end on this, have this high peak here, A, and I might try to descend from there. Okay, this might be too high to get to, but I'm going to keep that in mind. Now I want to get to a good, let's say I have, I'll give you an example here. Let's say I have a framework and where both voices are descending here. Let's see, I'm going to try to do something so that I'm going to use either the Nota Cambiata or the double neighbor. Okay, so I'm headed down by a step. That means I could use either the Nota Cambiata or a double neighbor. Since I've already used the double neighbor at the end, maybe I'll use a Nota Cambiata. Okay, so I'm going to start on that G, like I used for with my framework. Now remember the formula for Nota Cambiata. You're going to go in the same direction that you're headed, right? Then you're going to skip down and then step up. Okay, now let's check our intervals. Does this create any problems? This is a 2. This is 7. Okay, to an octave. Ah, look at that. So that is a Nota Cambiata. However, it does have 2 back-to-back dissonances. Is that allowed? Well, yes. Remember that cambiata, Nota Cambiata is one of the 2 exceptions to that rule. So I'm going to put NC for not North Carolina, but Nota Cambiata. So this works really well. What if you were headed upwards? Let's go to another one. Let's say we're okay. I'll try it from here. So this is the opposite. This is a B, so I'll go B to. Oops, what am I doing? D to E. Okay, here's my framework. Okay, I'm going to fill that in with quarter notes. And let's say I want to use a Nota Cambiata. Notice it's headed upwards by step. So I can use that Nota Cambiata formula. So I'm going to go upwards by step, skip up, step down. Okay, and double check that this works. Always a good idea. This is a fifth, going to a third, fourth, and sixth. Okay, look at that. I don't think this creates any problems. And again, that is the Nota Cambiata. Okay, notice that NC, not NO. There we go. All right. So I just used two different places to give you an example of the Nota Cambiata. And of course, you don't have to use the Nota Cambiata. It's just good to know that you have another tool in your tool belt. All right. Same goes for when you have a counterpoint below the cantus firmus. Again, it's most common to start with the quarter rest. And it's most common to end again with the double neighbor. Okay, so if you're ending, let's say we're ending with this A here. Okay, so let's fill this in with quarter notes. Again, we're going to start with the leading tone. We're in A minor. Go up by step, go down. Remember, upper neighbor, lower neighbor. And again, this is basically the ending formula that you typically use. Is it the only one? Well, no, but it's typical. Okay, 3, 2, 4, 3, octave. And again, double check that everything's working. Uh-oh, here we have two back-to-back dissonances. Is that all right? Well, yeah, this is double neighbor. Double neighbor, it's okay to have two back-to-back dissonances. Okay. All right, there you have it. You have a good start. Starting the exercise. Well, again, if you're ending with this A here, I would probably start with the same A. And let's say you're having trouble getting to, let's say, this note here. Let's say you want to. You're saying, well, how do I go up? Well, I don't want to use a lower neighbor here because then it's going to create parallel octaves. What could I do? Well, you could think about starting on the downbeat. You don't have to start on beat number 2. You might have an easier time in some cases starting on the downbeat. Okay, just know that you have the option. All right. All right, I wish you the very best. Make sure that you get a good start on this. Leave plenty of time. You're going to have to erase, rewrite in, have a piece of scratch paper that you're working with so that you can, express all of your ideas. And then when you're ready, copy it in. Again, I'm not looking that you're the master of third species counterpoint. It's just you have a first try at this. And this is the kind of thing that you would work on over the course of several semesters let's say over the course of 4, typically it's 4 classes in a sequence. Okay, so I hope that gives you a good head start with that. And once again, feel free to reach out at any time with questions. Hope you're doing well and take care.